Hi folks, somebody on YouTube asked if I would do a little comparison between Trongate and Codeigniter 3. So as far as the priorities go, what I mean by that is what's the elevator pitch? What does this thing bring you and why should you use this? Now if you're talking about Codeigniter 3, I would say small footprint. I would say it's stable, so it doesn't get updated much. And by the way, it's had a lot of criticism for that. And I would also say it's fast, meaning fast benchmarks, okay? That would be the elevator pitch for Codeigniter 3. Now for Trongate, I suppose the elevator pitch, you could say all of the same things here, but the main thing with Trongate is stability. And the funny thing is, there's a whole lot of people who criticise Codeigniter or who criticised it when it was active. It's kind of a bit dead now, right? But when it was active, a lot of people criticised the fact that it never gets updated. Trongate, on the other hand, well, it gets updated constantly, but Trongate prioritises stability above all else. So that's I think the elevator pitches for them. As far as licenses go, both frameworks use the MIT license. So there's no problems using this stuff commercially. There's nothing uncool or anything. As far as syntax go, they're very, very similar. Now, they don't share any core code. There's not one single line of Codeigniter code inside Trongate. But there are some similarities with syntax. I'm going to show you some of them and just give you an idea of how these two things look. So let's say, for example, reading from the URL, okay? So if you're going to be using something like Codeigniter 3 and you're going to read from the URL, you might say name is this URI segment 3, okay? So that's me reading a value from the URL using Codeigniter. With Trongate, I would do the same thing with name equals segment 3. As you can see, they're very similar, but Trongate is a little bit more compact. Let's say something like fetching a posted value from a form. Something like that, okay? So, to do that with Codeigniter 3, and again, we'll stick with the name example, you would say name is this input post name. And with Trongate, you would do the same thing with name is post name. As you can see, once again, they're similar syntaxes, but Trongate is a little bit more simple. And I could go on and on and on. Both of them have got optional true values as well that you could add if you want. So as far as syntax goes, they're very similar, but Trongate is generally a little bit more economical. Now there's some of them that they've got in common. So for example, creating a link. So in both cases you would have something like echo, anchor, something, and then something like that. And you'd have the same with Trongate. So there are a few that are the same, but like I say, Trongate's just a little bit more economical. Now one other difference as well is, in fact, I'm just going to quickly mention this because it's not on my little list here, is to do with coding style. Now, I think that CI3 has a coding style that's kind of like old school PHP. That's how I would describe it. Whereas Trongate has a coding style that is more pure PHP. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. So let's imagine we are doing something like setting a session variable or a session value, right? With CI3, you would say something like this: session set data name is John, or something like that. I think that's right. I hope it is. It might not be quite right, but it's that kind of idea. In the case of Trongate, we take the viewpoint that PHP actually handles this just fine. So we would just say session name equals John. So this is pure PHP. This is, we don't see any point in adding something to a framework if PHP can already handle it just fine. Alright, now let's talk about database interaction. How do these frameworks handle databases? Well, in the case of Codeigniter 3, there are a couple of different ways that you can handle databases, but the flagship feature, I suppose, is a thing called the active record class, which I do believe was inspired by Ruby on Rails. Now, the way that this works is you get a PHP class, here's the documentation, that gives you all sorts of functions for querying the database. So for example, here is fetching rows from a table. It would look something like that. So you can see that we're loading up some sort of DB class here, and then we're saying let's get from this table, and then we say for each query loading up result as row, blah 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 blah. So this is called the active record class. Trongate does have a model class. It does have one, but it relies upon using PDO, which comes with all modern installations of PHP, and some of the syntax is similar. So for example, fetching rows from a table, you'd say rows is this, you'd load up the model and you'd just say get, and maybe chuck in the table name if you want. Of course, if the table name was in the URL, if it was the first segment actually, you wouldn't even need to add that in. So that would be fetching rows from a table. Okay, let's do fetching a single record. So that would be something like record is this model get where. Maybe chuck in a little ID here. Now I think there's about 10 or 11 of these, and all of the stuff that you would expect to find is there. However, where I think the real differences start to appear is when we're dealing with table joins. Table joins represent a massive technical challenge for back-end developers all over the world. In fact, I can tell you that the first time I ever had to give a client a refund, and I've only had that happen, I think, twice in my career, it was because I messed up a really, really complicated table join. They're very, very difficult. And so when you look at the top 10 frameworks, any framework actually, they have the same approach to table joins. So for example, here's Laravel, and what they'll do is they'll give you some kind of PHP class that does a join, and it's all kind of the same type of idea here that we get. I could show you any top 10 PHP framework. They all basically do that, including Codeigniter. But Trongate has a different approach. What Trongate does is if you have a really complicated table join to do, let's say I'm doing a join here on the Trongate website, and let's say I want to find items on the module market that belong to a certain member. Well, I can look on the left here. This is the graphical query builder, and these are all tables. I'm dragging members across, and I'm going to drag a table called publishers across, and then I'm going to drag a little table called module market items across like this. Now, if I want to find all of the items that belong to a certain member, well, I can join where publisher ID is this, and I'll do an inner join. And then I can join where publisher ID is this. Now here I might do a right outer join. And then I could say something like, okay, give me everything from module market items. I could say, give me the publisher name and give me the member username. When I'm happy, I can click show SQL. And what's happening here is the graphical query builder is giving us pure SQL code. So I can then just copy that, head into the text editor. I'm going to just say SQL equals, and then we can just paste in. And of course, you can modify your query and add query binding and variables and stuff like that. It's very easy to do. But ultimately, you would then just say something like rows is this model, passing in the query. Let's chuck in the SQL and we'll have a little bunch of objects coming back. So As you can see, this is a dramatically different approach to doing those complex table joins. Whereas all of the other frameworks will have you faffing about with their PHP classes, Trongate has you actually drawing the joins. If you make a mistake, that's fine. You can just take this, drop it over here, rearrange things, do whatever makes you feel good. Now, just to state the obvious, there's two benefits from using a query builder. The first benefit, of course, is that it's just a better experience. It's so nice to be able to just drag things across and you can do the joins and visually just see what these joins mean, you know? It's so nice to do that and really, really easy to work with. The other advantage, and I'll just finish my little join here, the other advantage from doing this, of course, is that because we are just generating a query and then going straight to PDO with our query, well, as you can imagine, it means that we've got less overheads than if we used something like this or something like this active record thing here. In fact, quite frankly, there's less stuff to learn as well. So because there's less overheads, because we're getting closer to the core technology, of course, what that means, and that's the wrong page, but what that means is that Trongate has got these incredible benchmarks that really blow the competition out of the water. And here's just a little example for you. So this is Codeigniter 3 down here. We're talking average request per second, and Trongate is much, much faster. By the way, I've been in touch with Adam Spencer, and I'm planning on doing a YouTube video soon where I can show you how to authenticate this data and you can repeat these results. This is all real, and I am going to be uploading that pretty soon, hopefully. So that's the database stuff. Now let's move on and talk about innovations. If there is a genuine innovation with CI3, I don't know what it is, so I'm going to have to say 0. I'm just not aware of anything that's a real innovation. Trongate has got a few innovations. So I think that the installation mechanism where it downloads directly from, well, maybe not. Actually, let's be, okay, complete genuine innovations. Let's see. I think we're talking about, certainly the architecture is unique. There's nothing else using hierarchical assets, views, controllers. The App Store is based off of the Apple App Store, but as far as PHP frameworks go, it's the only framework that gives you something like this. So if you want a nice news section, you can get this free of charge, look at screenshots, a little video, read reviews, and you can get all of this at the click of a button, even the database stuff. So Trongate has got that going on, and I think it's kind of cool. Now, what else? If we're talking about genuine innovations, gee, everybody's built everything, so it's a challenge. I think the update mechanism is an innovation. So the main workings of the Trongate framework are contained within a folder called Engine. And when you use the desktop app, it reads the license number, and if there's any updates, you get given a choice. Do you want to update? Do you not want to update? Or do you want to read more? That particular mechanism, I don't think you'll find anywhere. So we've certainly got a few innovations, certainly, but I hope that people will not be insensitive to the fact that a lot of the things Trongate does, it just does them really well. I think Trongate has got the best-in-class API manager. I think it's the only API manager that the PHP community has that challenges the best of Node.js. I know for a fact that Trongate has got the best multi-file uploaders in the industry. In fact, I've done a YouTube video, and I'll leave you the links. In fact, here's a little screenshot here where I take the best of what the industry has. So we take Dropzone and FilePond and we put them against Trongate, and this is what happens. So this is Dropzone going against Trongate. I know it's a bit blurred, but as you can see, Trongate is just faster. Trongate's got a really beautiful code generator. Of course, lots of frameworks have that, but I think if you have a look at the one Trongate has, you would have to be a completely insensitive moron to not see the difference. I mean, just look at this beautiful code generator with its low definition video here. But just look at how beautiful this is. This is us adding different fields on here. So this is a variable character. And you can see all of the suggestions. It has the most commonly used form fields programmed into it. And it's just a really, really nice thing to work with. I think it's the best that I can find, actually. So we've got that. We've got our own JavaScript libraries. And Trongate even has a custom CSS library that I think does something that everybody must surely look at and say, why did we not think of that? Because when you think about CSS frameworks, they all basically do the same thing. So your average CSS library or CSS framework will have you do a button, and then you would typically do a class of BTN or something like that. Well, Trongate has a different approach. We figured, what if you just made it so that you just do that, and then the framework itself just makes it look beautiful? Isn't that a great idea? So that means there's nothing to learn. Really, there's nothing to learn, you know. So we've got Trongate CSS. I've had a few people tell me they think it's the best. And here's a little bit of what it looks like. So here's our buttons, changing sizes, changing colors, forms, lists, tables, and look at the code. There's no classes, there's no IDs, there's nothing to learn. I have to say that building all of these JavaScript libraries with the modules and whatnot and the CSS stuff, here's our pop-up calendars here. Building all of this took ages. It really did. It was about 6 months worth of work. Here's a date time picker. This is all, actually I wrote every single line of code for this personally. And it is a lot of work. Now the reason why I did all of that is because I did not want Trongate to be under the cosh of somebody else's rewrite schedule. We're aiming for maximum stability here, you know. Having said that, if you like using things like Bootstrap or Tailwind or anything else like that, then it's absolutely fine. You can continue using those things. It's absolutely fine. It's just that it's an option that you have. You get to choose what you're going to use. And we're certainly not going to have our framework broken every 12 months because somebody came out with a new version of something. So, I think that's about us. I'll finish up by talking a little bit about architecture. Now, Codeigniter uses MVC. Here on the left is an example of a Codeigniter app that I've just downloaded. So you can see that we've got a models folder. There's the M. We've got views and we've got controllers. Now, I was just hypothetically imagining a contact form. Maybe you'd have a contact.php class here and a form in here, and maybe even something else in here that deals with contact forms. I don't even know. But the key thing is that MVC is nice, and if this was the mid-90s, I would be saying let's all use MVC. The challenge with MVC though is portability. Suppose you've got another site and you'd like to use a contact form. Well, you have to fish out your stuff from here and maybe from here, and it gets really, really complicated, especially if you've got things like JavaScript files and pictures and all sorts of other things that maybe don't fit in with this type of architecture. Now, in the land of Codeigniter, somebody recognized that this was a problem and they came up with a thing called HMVC. So HMVC, and I do have a little diagram here. This is where you have these clusters of model view controllers like this, and it's a much more upgradable type of architecture. So instead of the usual MVC, we get these little clusters. Here's an example of HMVC being used in a Codeigniter app. This one is for a call center, and you can see we've got a folder called modules, and inside modules we've got tons and tons of folders here, and each one if I just take you in, let's say this one comments, you'll see it's got controllers, models, views, exactly like what I was just showing you there. So, for example, here's, let's see if we can find one that's worth looking at. Something like, okay, how about if we say deal build? No, let's not do deal builder. Let's do dealer orders. So this is for ordering cars from a car dealership. You can see we've got a controllers folder. In this example, we've not got models, but we do have views. And if we click in, you can see that we've got this PHP class here that deals with ordering cars, you know. So what I've just shown you there is MVC and then HMVC. For many years, I was a huge fan of HMVC, and I think it is an improvement upon MVC. It's a lot more modern and a lot more portable, and scalable as well. But the challenge with HMVC is that it doesn't answer questions like, well, where do you put pictures and JavaScript files and all of that other stuff that's part of a modern day web application? Well, that is where HAVC comes in. So it's pretty much the same as HMVC in terms of you've got these little clusters. But the difference is, instead of an M, a models folder, we have an A folder for assets. Now, what does assets stand for? Well, anything you want. JavaScript files, CSS, videos, absolutely anything at all you can have inside that assets folder. So now you can have truly self-contained modules that have all of the stuff that you could possibly hope for inside those things. Now, the funny thing is that this method of structuring apps, let's just call it modular. A module is just a folder, right? That way of building apps is incredibly modern. I think that this is virtually identical to how Angular structures apps, for example. Now, they may not use the same terminology. They may call it component driven, but it's basically the same type of idea, you know? And it's this architecture that makes things like the module market here possible. It's the architecture that lets us go in and grab some feature like this and then have it installed at the click of a button. It's possible because everything is all self-contained. Do you know what I mean? And that applies not only for modules, but even for entire designs. So you can go in and have this design at the click of a button, and thanks to the architecture, it's all self-contained and it all just works. Well, I hope that you found this useful. This has been my little comparison of Codeigniter 3 and Trongate. If you want to learn more about any of the things I've discussed here with regards to Trongate, head to trongate.io and check out the learning zone. I'm not going to click into it because it's being worked on just now. But nevertheless, from the learning zone, you'll get all sorts of free training, 100% free, and it will walk you through everything that we've discussed here and more. Don't forget, we've also got the help bar. So if you have any questions or anything, you can chuck that on here as well. And again, that's all free. There's quite a few unresolved ones here. Hopefully we'll have those sorted soon. So anyway, I do want to thank you for your time. Stay cool, and I'll see you soon.